Hey everyone, welcome back to the Layback Podcast. Joining us today is Aiden May. Aiden was the 70th overall draft pick to the Miami Marlins this past year. We would say second round, comp, something, not entirely sure exactly where that falls, but 70th is a good enough number to go off of. He didn't get any innings with them after a massive workload at Oregon State, and he was certainly an accomplished pitcher there with a few other stops in his college career along the way, including Arizona and Pima Community College. So before I butcher anything more than I already have, I'm going to toss it over to Aiden so he can talk a little bit more about his bio.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks, Adam. That was a pretty good job already. So I guess to touch on that, I'm from a small little town in New Mexico called Tijeras. I mean, not even really there. I'm from the middle of nowhere, but basically Albuquerque. And I grew up pitching at altitude's not very fun, but growing up in New Mexico was fun. Got to pitch a lot and play baseball a lot. And that's just been the story of my life so far is just baseball, baseball, baseball. And like you kind of touched on, I've been around the block a little bit all over the place, and I've had a great career so far. And I look forward to what's to come next. About to head out for spring training, so I'm looking forward to that.
And shame on me. I suppose I buried maybe the most important person in this entire process, Tim Campos.
Oh
We
yeah.
probably wouldn't be here right now talking if it wasn't for Tim.
Definitely not. Tim has been a great foundation for a lot of my experience within baseball and a lot of my, I guess, production so far and the way that I kind of attack the game. I always say that he kind of got me started on being really process driven in the way that I attack everything and really opened my mind up to the more complex and analytical side of baseball that I never really saw when I was a kid. Obviously, you're just going out there and throwing. You don't know anything about the specifics of baseball or anything. And he's been awesome so far. And that has been a great connection for us, too.
For sure. When did you first step foot in Albuquerque Baseball Academy?
I mean, I played with ABA growing up a lot. It was kind of just it's been the staple program of Albuquerque for however many years. I mean, a bunch of big leaguers have come through here. Like Bregman's obviously the big one. You've got Mitch Garver. Blake Swihart was a huge one. Those guys have been in and around the program for forever. And so if you want to play high level baseball in Albuquerque, that's kind of the place to go. But Campos didn't actually join ABA until what would that be, my freshman year of high school. And then so I started working with him maybe freshman summer going into sophomore year.
In the Power Arm, you were part of the original Power Arm group.
Oh yeah, that was a fun little group. We didn't know we Campos knew what he was doing, but it's so much different than it is today, and it's kind of fun to look back on those times.
How many draft picks, not even college guys, but draft picks were in that original Power Arm group?
I don't know. There's probably, I want to say, five of us. But I mean, Campos has had his hands in so many different areas. It's hard for me to say because there's probably more somewhere filled in there. Actually, six that really stand out, and there's probably more than that even. But there's been a lot of us through the years, and he's done a tremendous job getting guys not just to pro ball, but just to any level of baseball. The amount of Division I commits and college guys that have gone through there is I couldn't even put a number on it. So it's been a really good program.
Which is why I asked to go the draft route because I figured we could at least have some sort of tangible number as opposed to me asking you about the college guys and you'd say, shoot, probably, I don't know, every kid that was in the program. The fact
Yeah,
that you
exactly.
guys had six kids get drafted out of the same workout group when you were a freshman in high school is insane.
Yeah, there was I guess to be more specific, it wasn't just like my age group. It wasn't just like my freshmen, but there was, some
Fair.
older guys and across the board. But there's been more guys than I can count. And there's coming through the pipeline. I mean, some of the kids in high school right now that Campos is working with, I mean, just straight up studs. So it's really cool to see the progression of that. And like for me to have, I guess, the beginning stages of that and like some to the effect of maybe inspiring or helping the future group is kind of cool to me because I want to have my part in helping New Mexico baseball become nationally recognized and people to understand what it is we do here.
For sure. Yeah, you look at Major League Baseball and it's got guys, notable guys from the state. And obviously, Mitchell Parker stepped on the scene this year. He's another guy from the facility who really is making a name for Albuquerque baseball. And I know you, Jacob, and a few others are following suit. Hopefully, you guys get your call here shortly. But let's run through the career a little bit. I don't know if you want to talk through the high school career at all or really just pick up with the UCL tear going into your senior year. You tell me where you want to start this journey?
I'll give a little background of just kind of my whole high school career. So, like I said, I started working with compost going into really my sophomore year. And that fall, I started doing, it was the first time I really did like a velo targeted program. That fall, I was maybe low 80s to touching like an 84, 85 maybe. The spring was a little tick above that, maybe 85 to 87 on my best day. And then I really started to grow a little bit, and I started to throw harder. The velo came really quick my junior summer. I hit 88 for the first time. The very next weekend, I hit 89 out of the bullpen. And then I made a start a couple days later and I hit 90 for the first time. So it was a very rapid growth. And unfortunately, in that time, I had a UCL tear, which looking back on it, it was probably expected. I was maybe 160 pounds, like maybe 5'9", 5'10", and just a wiry, like I was very high effort and I threw the piss out of it, but it wasn't very sustainable, let's say. And so I tore my UCL. I did a lot of rehab, and at that time it was when PRP was kind of really new. So I opted to go the PRP route because it was just a partial tear. Looking back on it now, knowing the medical stuff of some of the PRP injections don't work for certain types of tears in the different bundles of the UCL. Looking back, I probably should have just opted to get surgery at the time, but hindsight's 2020, and you figure things out. I rehabbed the PRP for a good 5-6 months. I came back. That was my junior year, which was COVID. And so I pitched like a couple innings, and then the world shut down and I had to just like throw in the street. And like I said, I'm from the mountains. So like I was in the middle of nowhere trying to get my throwing in, trying to do stuff. And then once the facility opened back up, I threw a couple bullpens with real intent. And the second I started to get some real intent behind it again, it just blew out. Looking back on it, like I said, I was a ticking time bomb because the PRP just didn't work for those types of tears, and it was probably more significant than we originally thought. And so I should have just opted for surgery, but it is what it is. So anyway, I ended up getting surgery. And then that was, I think, a very pivotal decision and a pivotal moment in my career, because I sat there and I'd always worked hard. I'd always done the right things and really got after it in the gym, but I wasn't very intentional with the work that I was doing. So maybe I was really focused on the flashy stuff, I guess we'll say, lifting big weight, throwing really hard. And I didn't really do the things in order to protect myself from the injuries that plagued me so far. And so I swore to myself, I said, I'm going to be very intentional. I'm going to be very specific and attack this in the right way. And lucky enough to have somebody like Tim, like Coach Campos in my corner, helping me through everything was unbelievable. We worked with a person, his name is Casey Mulholland, who's one of the best workload management people in the business. I mean, he understands workload more than anybody. And Campos worked with him to kind of create, and he took his return to throw program and we tailored it and specified it to whatever I was doing. It was very velo specific, which is a lot different than other programs where they're distance specific. And so every throw that I had was tracked with a pocket radar, and I would track it with pulse. So I had workload going back months and months and months. All of my work in the gym was very specified, was very intentful. I was working on getting my lower half bigger, getting my body in general just bigger. I focused hugely on shoulder strength, strengthening my forearm. I had a great physical therapist as well. And so, I mean, just throughout the process, I had so many people behind me. I guess I'll say another big benefit was I had a ton of time. So given when the tear was, I had over a year and a half before I needed to be in real game scenarios anymore. It went fantastic. I mean, Campos and I were very, like I said, intentional, and everything was tracked and everything was managed, and it came out very well. I was throwing harder than ever. During that time, I was committed to a Division I school called Wichita State. But for various reasons, with COVID, having older guys coming back and me being injured, they took away my scholarship. And so I went the junior college route, which was the best decision I could have made. I went to Pima Community College, and those guys were just fantastic. Coach Hockme does a tremendous job, and he gave me all the resources and all the time and the management in the world to just be successful. And so I don't know if you want to step in or you want me to keep going into the college section.
No, that's probably a good spot to pause for a minute. Yep. So there's a few things that we can speak on.
Yep.
The fact that you even learned who PRPs are for and who they're not for, I'm sure that was more of a hindsight learning process than it was in the moment. But that's a massive piece. I don't know the last time we covered that on the podcast, but it's probably worth bringing up again. Simply, if you have a distal tear, you're probably not going to get a lot of benefit from PRP injection helping with the tear. So it needs to be partial and it needs to be proximal if
Yep.
you're going to have pretty much any good outcome from it. PRP
Yep.
is not going to be bad. It just might be a waste, which
Yep.
is obviously what you ran into yourself. So the fact that you covered that, I think is very helpful. So other people that are trying to avoid surgery, they just know whether PRP is a safe or productive route. Then
Yep.
moving on, it's great you brought up Casey. Casey, friend of the program, guest of the podcast. I always love when he gets a shout out. There's no question he's put in more work than just about anyone when it comes to not only return to throw, but like you said, acute to chronic workload ratio and shifting the paradigm a little bit from just throwing on feel or distance to actually tracking it with actionable information. So there's no question you had a bunch of people in your corner. I appreciate you letting me get back in the mix here, just
Yep.
summarize a few things or call a few things out. But yeah, if you want to pick right back up with Pima and maybe how you landed on Pima or the opportunities that you had coming out of there, because you were only there for 1 year, correct?
Yeah, it was, and that was kind of the intent from the start. And I give a ton of credit to Coach Hockamy. I've had a lot of friends that they go to junior college programs and the coaches kind of hold them back their freshman year so that way they can keep them for 2 years and obviously then go on to Division I schools and whatever. But Coach Hockamy from the start, I guess he just was like, you know what, we understand you're going to be here for 1 year. We just want to help you do what you're going to do and then send you off and wish you the best of luck. And so I give him so much credit. And he really was a very beneficial coach to me. I guess the connection there and why I chose Pima is he used to be the UNM pitching coach. And so he has huge ties to New Mexico and a lot of my coaches, and they recruit heavily to the state. And so I had a bunch of buddies that were going there too. I got to live with, three of my really good friends my freshman year. And so it was just kind of like the perfect situation, I guess, for me coming off of an injury, needing somebody that I had a connection with and that I could stamp my name on what I needed to do and what I needed to take care of. And then I want to say it was all sunshine and rainbows, but it was actually a really tough year when it comes to like statistics. But I guess it was just coming off injury, having this high octane velo that I'd never had before. My stuff was bigger, it was louder, and my command was just brutal. It was terrible. I don't even want to give a number on my walks per nine, but it was up there. Once again, credit to Coach Hockamy. He came up to me one day and he goes, you know what, we're going to stick by you. Like we know once it clicks, it's going to click and we're just going to roll with you. And towards the second half of the year, my strikeouts went up, my walks went down. I was able to feel out the ball a lot more and just get my feel for the mound back, which was tough because that first stretch of the year, the first half of the year was, I mean, it felt like I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to attack the problem because my stuff was there. My arm felt great. My body was syncing well, but something just wasn't clicking on the command and the control side of things. And so I think it was just about getting on the mound and just making more throws, getting used to my body more. I'd gained a lot of weight, strong weight, but I wasn't skinny anymore. I was very bulky. So getting used to that, getting used to how I was moving, the new velocity, the new movement, and everything just took time. And so I attribute a lot of my late success and a lot of my future ability to kind of work through problems to the way that Coach Hockamy gave me the opportunity to keep battling through and keep figuring out and problem solving.
You kind of stole the question right from me and answered it. I was going to ask what you credit the issue to, but it sounds like it was just exposure. You just needed exposure to live situations, game batters. And yes, you had this long runway to get ready again. But I've had this conversation time and time again with pitchers. There is nothing like game competition. Yes, you can get completely dialed off the field. You
Yep.
can nail your weight, your velo, all these things. But when a hitter steps in the box, the lights come on, it's different. And that command sometimes just isn't there. And for you, you really think it just came from seeing hitters over and over and over again and having that long leash to get comfortable?
I mean, that was definitely the first piece of it. And I was kind of going to wait to go on to this because my time at Arizona, a lot of command problems also followed me as well.
Ooh.
But that was the first step, I will say,
Okay.
in fixing and attacking the command problems was just comfortability and getting back on the mound. And then from there, I guess I'll just go right into this.
Yeah.
So I committed to the University of Arizona. I went to U of A after that, and my stuff took a big jump up. I mean, I just had filthy, nasty stuff, but once again, the command problems just followed me. It definitely wasn't as extensive as it was at the beginning of the Pima season, but it was definitely still there.
Quick timeout. I
Yeah, yeah.
apologize. How hard were you throwing during these different times?
So my freshman year at Pima, I was up to, I'll say 97, but that was really another change, I guess, was at Pima. It was like always the first inning was like, let's gas out, pedal to the metal. And I'm sitting like 96 in the first inning. And then the innings after that would go down and I'd probably settle in about 92, 93, which for me was another issue of like not burning the tank too quick, and something that I finished in subsequent years. At Arizona, I was probably more in like the 92 to 95 range, once again up to sixes and sevens. But really, once again, it was more of a command issue than anything. The stuff was always there, and I got opportunities to start. At Arizona, I was the Sunday guy all year pretty much, aside from like one weekend when I was the midweek guy at the very start of the year. And then like 2 weekends in, Sunday guy got hurt. I jumped in that role, and I had a lot of ups and downs. I had a lot of really good starts and I had a lot of really, really rough starts. And a lot of that was, when you even look at the numbers, the walks weren't crazy, but it was always like one inning. I'd have like 3 walks or 2 walks. And so the totals for the game would equal maybe what you would consider normal amounts that weren't anything crazy, but the blow up innings were really big and tough to sort through. My time at Arizona, I have a lot of great things to say about the program. Like I have a lot of really good friends there, and they did a tremendous job. But for certain reasons, it just wasn't quite the right fit for me, like culturally and the way that I wanted to get my work. I wasn't able to really, I guess, tinker would be the right word, and try to fix things and problem solve. And it seemed like I was just kind of stuck. And so I wanted a change of pace. And so I entered the portal to go find a new opportunity. And my best friend in the world, who I played with in high school, who was All-American and played at Oregon State. So he's a 2-year starter at this point at Oregon State. He's been their Saturday guy. His name is Jacob Kamatz. And him and I talked, and just the way that he spoke about the program and the way that he spoke about it for years at this point was just, such an emphasis on development, such an emphasis on culture, and like finding and figuring out your own identity. And so to me, that just had all the makings of everything I was looking for in a program. And then I was able to be very intentional with the changes and the process that I wanted to make. So my first point of attack with all of that was getting consistent pitch shapes. So in the past, like I said, my stuff was loud, but it was very inconsistent. I had kind of a bad, inefficient cutty four seam. My changeup was good metrically, but my command of it was kind of And then I had this cutter thing that was all over the map. And then my slider has been my bread and butter. That was really the only consistent pitch that I had to this point. Going back to the drawing board, I was like, all right, we're done with this four seam. I'm gonna just, I'm gonna throw a seam shift sinker, and I'm just gonna go for it. I tried to build out like a new shape for the cutter, which I ended up scrapping later and just simplifying. But the changeup was there, the sweeper was there, the sinker was there. And so getting consistent pitch shapes, and then two, just simplifying my approach. I tried to be so specific with, like, everyone always talks about command, command, command. And some pitchers are able to do it. They're able to look at I'm going to hit this down and away to a righty every single time. And they're just going to land it there. And that just wasn't something that was really feasible for me. So I simplified it. I said, every pitch I'm going to throw is going to be right down the middle, and I'm going to let it work. Maybe with certain changes to that, if I had 2 strikes or I had whatever it might be. But it was just simplify, simplify, simplify. Get the stuff to where it's so good that I can just throw it down the middle and let it work, and I don't have to worry about being perfect. So that was the biggest thing. The other thing was, like I said, my velocity was good, but it wasn't elite. And so my biggest thing was getting my velocity floor up. I knew my max velos were fine, but I wanted to have a harder average velo. I think at Arizona, I averaged like 92.7 or something like that, like just shy of 93, maybe right around 93. And then this last year, I averaged 94.6. So getting my velo floor up, and my max velo took a step up as well. I hit 98.5, I want to say, but it was really more about that average velocity, just being more consistent, being able to hold my velocity later in games, and just be better overall. So that was kind of my thought process, and kudos to everybody at Oregon State. I mean, I loved everything about that program, and they gave me all the opportunity in the world. Coach Canham and Coach Dorman are 2 of my best coaches I've ever had, and they stuck by me. They helped me. They did everything they could to set us up for success, and I owe a lot of my success to them, and just the culture and the impact that program has. I mean, it's unrivaled. It's a fantastic place to be.
So we can take a few pauses, I suppose, on the
Yeah.
Oregon State topic because there's a lot to unpack. The really cool opportunity you get to play with your high school best friend.
Yep.
Kamat's had already been there. So is he the one that started the recruiting process for you? Were you even considering Oregon State, or was this just from him from the get-go?
Well, so I had kind of talked. I mean, like I said, him and I are really good friends. So even throughout the year, like we were talking, and I was telling him some of the issues that I was having. Like, man, I just can't figure stuff out. And so I think in the back of his mind, he's like, well, if Aiden enters the portal, then then think about that. And so I didn't even like approach him about the subject. So I entered the portal because I wanted to go to like I felt like Oregon State would have been a good place. I wanted to go there, but I didn't want to like barge in on him and be like, hey, man. And so I actually didn't say anything to him. He then, after I entered the portal, was like, well, man, are you considering OSU? And I was like, well, yeah, I didn't want to barge in, but
Yeah.
of course, dude. And so that whole situation ended up working out really well after I entered the portal, and him and I sat down and we were talking about everything in the program. I had a couple calls with the coaches and it just seemed like the right fit. And a big part of that was too, like every time you're getting recruited, it's always going to be the flashy stuff. Coaches are trying to get you there. And like that stuff is true, but you can't see the true skeleton of the program unless somebody in there, you have somebody that you trust. And so Jacob, him and I talked, and I asked him a bunch of hard hitting questions about what the culture's like, what the program's like, and he was straight up about everything. And so having somebody that's super honest about the goings on in a program is really tough to deny the specialness of that, I guess.
And then you also mentioned Oregon State gave you that wiggle room to tinker and kind of figure things out. So was that a hands-on process from Dorman and the coaching staff, or was that just let's step away and we'll let Aiden work for a bit?
It was a great mix of that. And like I said, the coaches were fantastic because Dor is awesome. He knows a lot of stuff that I don't. But what's great is I feel like I have a really good knowledge base, especially when it comes to pitch design and when it comes to my pitch design and my workings on as a pitcher specifically. And then Dorman would come in and he would add in little things that he thought were beneficial to me, and we would kind of go back and forth and just have conversations and figure a lot of this stuff out. And when I said that I had a lot of leeway, is like I kind of went to them in the fall and I was like, hey, like I'm just gonna try a bunch of stuff. We're gonna work on a lot of stuff. And they were like, yeah, like we don't care about fall numbers. Like we're here to win in the spring. And so just to have that idea of like they're gonna ride with me, like I'm gonna be able to start. I'm gonna have the opportunity to start at least. And also have the opportunity to tinker and work through things and really figure out my identity as a pitcher in the fall was huge and beneficial. And like I said, I mean, we just have a ton of conversations and go back and forth and eventually come to what we figured was hopefully the right answer.
Speaking of the tinkering, you talked about your pitch shapes and your arsenal. How different was that from your, I guess, your should have been ideal arsenal either prior to TJ or coming off of TJ? You mentioned that you switched to more of a seam shift sinker. Your slider was your bread and butter. Changeup always had the shape, but it was about dialing it in and having the weird cutter thing. But prior to that, you had like the weird cutty fastball. Had this always been the optimal profile for you, and it was just a matter of finding it? Or do you think things changed for you over time, if you're following what I'm getting at?
Yeah, no, things definitely changed over time. And like you kind of said a pre TJ, even before TJ, I was over the top. I mean, I was like a kind of ride heater guy with a big curveball. My ability was always in to spin the ball. I could always spin the ball really well, which like I said, it showed up in my curveball. And then I did my rehab with Campos and slowly kind of lowered the slot a little bit, maybe to get into my more natural groove and just to address some of what we thought was causing me to get hurt in the first place. And in doing that, because I was so prone to like spin the ball already, I became hugely supinated. My supination bias is maybe it's one of the biggest that I've ever seen. I am so far supination biased. I couldn't pronate something if you held a gun to my head. But it's worked out really well, and I've kind of leaned into that. I've gone so like at Pima, I was still trying to throw that curveball, and then eventually I was like, this thing sucks. I'm like, I'm just gonna throw a big sweeper. I mean, it started out really slow. I mean, it was like 74 miles an hour. It still had the big shape that it does, but it was slow. And so I just threw it more and more over time. I leaned more into my supination bias, And now I'm able to get 20 plus inches of sweep at 85 miles an hour. And so it's got plus 10 miles an hour. It's gained movement, and I've gained command of it just because of how much I can throw that and how much I have thrown that. And then with the other stuff, like I said, I was so dead set in like throwing this four seam, but it was like I can't get more than like 11 vert on anything. I think it joked around the highest vert pitch I threw last year was a changeup that I kind of like got under a little bit and like rose up. And of course that I gave up a double off of it. But it's kind of funny to me because you always think of like these changes that you're making, and it always changes over time. And like it's to my detriment some points, but I'm so like specific about the movement qualities that I want that like even when I get there, then I'm like, all right, how can I make this better? And so like this off season's been really, really tough for me because I'm like, I'm trying to do so many things because this is the first time in my life I've had so much time. So I'm like, all right, I'm trying to play with the sinker a little bit. I'm trying to play with the changeup a little bit, get the sweep, play with the cutter. And so I've gotten a ton of stuff done and I'm really happy with it. But just the way that I am, I'm never really like satisfied with that. And so my arsenal's grown a lot over time. And a big change in that was just like my shift from run to focusing on depth. Like I feel like so many people are just like run the ball, run the ball, run the ball. But in doing that, you're making yourself really prone to opposite-handed hitters. Like if you're just focusing on run, then if you're a righty, then lefties are just going to kill you. And that was my biggest struggle was, all right, how can I attack lefties? And the more that you create depth with your pitches, especially your fastballs and your changeups, it's going to make you platoon neutral. Like you're not going to have to worry about handedness. And so I focused completely on how can I kill depth on my changeup? How can I kill depth on my sinker? And it just kind of took over. And at this point, like that's where I've done it. And I don't run a pitch more than maybe 15 inches on my best one, but it's probably around more 13, 14 inches average, 12 inches. But it's one vert, zero vert, hopefully. And so like that's been my biggest change is just going, how can I get this pitch lower and lower on the depth? And then that will take over kind of the weak contact area of it and the platoon side of everything.
Sticking on pitch metrics now, we can nerd out for a little bit. You talk about the run you're getting, you're talking about the IVB. Do you know roughly what your spin efficiency is that you're then able to lean into this seam shift quality?
It changes a little bit, but I'm generally in the 75 to 85% around their spin efficiency. Yeah. Sometimes it's even a little bit lower than that. But really, I've kind of targeted trying to be in that range. I mean, that's kind of your sweet spot for seam shift. And so, like I said, I'm really lucky to have benefited from understanding that a little bit and like having people around me that have understood that and trying to figure that out and tinker. But I think what's kind of funny to me is, and I never really knew this, I was talking with the Marlins big league analytics guy, and we were going over edgertronic data that I hadn't seen before of just when I was down in Jupiter. And the way that seam shift helps me the most isn't with my sinker, it's with my changeup. Because I throw, it's the most, he claims, his name is Brandon Mann, he said it's the most supinated changeup he's ever seen. So I'm literally like, around the ball, I'm throwing it almost like a football. And then because I'm able, it gets like this weird inefficient gyro spin, and then it seam shifts back. And so that pitch was such an unlock for me because it looks like my slider or my cutter. It has like slider gyro spin, but then it goes back the other way and then it gets negative vert. And so it's this funky, weird pitch that like metrically isn't anything, it's good, but it's not like jaw-dropping, like big, huge numbers that you would expect. But it got a 46% whiff rate this last year. And the more I threw it, the better it made everything else. And so like that was the biggest unlock for me is understanding seam shift past just a sinker, but seam shift on every other one of your pitches, getting seam shift and getting to these movement qualities of whatever your preference is. Like if you're hugely pronated biased, or like in my case, when you're hugely supinated biased, taking advantage of those capacities that you have from these huge biases.
Given your biases being supinated, and speaking of the seam shift, so not only is that lower efficiency on the changeup, so you're getting the depth out of it, so then it's almost like a two break changeup in a way, you're getting the depth and the run. Then the sweeper, you're getting seam shift on that as well. You're getting seam effects because it's getting carried across the zone like a frisbee would.
Yeah, 100%. So,
although it's not normally thought of that way, you're effectively throwing a high efficiency sweeper, I'm assuming. Yeah, as it's getting taken horizontally across the zone. Yeah, dude,
Exactly.
I love this stuff. So then where's the cutter at now?
So that's been kind of my biggest hurdle. Like I said, generally, like a cutter is supposed to be a higher vert pitch, maybe not as much sweep, but you're trying to get on the zero line kind of with at least some amount of vert. And to me, like I said, it is just about impossible for me to get any kind of vert at all, which helps with other pitches, but it's really tough when you're trying to throw four seams or cutters. And so I've gone through at this point, I think 4 different cutter grips, and I finally have one that's just about perfect. The best part about being so supinated bias is I can maintain velo when I'm throwing slider E pitches. And so I've found a grip that's perfect. I can get it in the 6 vert range, and hopefully in Florida, where the ball moves more, it'll be around the 8 vert range. Then it's got like -4, -5 inches of sweep at 89 plus. I've thrown a couple at 90, 91, which is perfect to me. Like that's right in the range that I want. Because this last year at Oregon State, I was throwing a cutter at the beginning of the year, and it was more gyro-y. The shape was kind of inconsistent, but we'll say it was basically like a bad gyro slider. Didn't do anything that it was supposed to. It got hammered, and I think it was because like guys were kind of in between on the sinker and the sweeper, and then they were just like bat speed to the cutter and just got hammered. And so maybe 4 starts into the year, I was just like, screw this. Like, let's just scrap this, go with what's working. Because in my mind, I was like, there's no real situation that I couldn't just throw a changeup or a sweeper. And so I was like, let's go back to the drawing board, wait to the off season. And so that was a big point of emphasis for me this year or this offseason is like, I need to get a true cutter shape down. And I think I finally found one that's perfect. The velo's good, the movement's great, and my command of it for just have thrown it for a little while is surprisingly well above average, I would say. So I'm really happy with where that's at right now.
Have you thrown it to hitters at all to this point?
No, I mean, I've just been doing some velocity and some pitch design pens, but I haven't thrown to hitters at all. We were thinking about doing lives, but then we were like, it's so long until we're playing in games. I'll just go off what the Marlins want to have me doing and kind of stick with their plan.
The reason I asked was kind of getting ahead a little bit, but the pitch metric nerdy stuff, granted, how much depth you're getting on everything you're throwing likely has the cutter playing with more vert than a TrackMan plot would say, or
Of
like
course.
the IVB would say.
Of
So
course.
although it only says you're getting 6-ish inches of IVB, you're still getting 6, 7 above what your most occurring fastball is. So it's still a massive separation there. And then on top of that, given your slightly lower slot now, I'm sure you can kind of play the vertical approach angle game a little bit.
Yeah, no, and that's been the biggest target. Going back to that conversation that I had with Brandon Mann, the Marlins analytics guy, I guess I'll summarize kind of the points of like, if I was to throw my arsenal to minor leaguers right now, I'd probably be all right. It wouldn't really be to the effect of anything crazy. I wouldn't have to make any drastic changes. The problem comes then of when you're in the big leagues, and then big league hitters are so good that then they look and I just have this low quadrant. I mean, my sweeper is usually low, my split change is really low, and my sinker is really low. And I just have nothing up. There's no quadrant I can build out up, which when you're facing major league hitters is a big issue. They're so good that they can make those adjustments and take all the ones that are balls and usually get some kind of a bat on the ones that are strikes. And so that cutter is going to be so massive for lefties specifically because like you said, even though the vert isn't 20 or anything substantial, it's enough that I can get it up and into lefties and really play into that upper quadrant and just get something in there that'll take their eyes up. So then I can still get the swings on the split changes. I can still get the ground balls and the whiffs on the sweepers. And so whatever it is, it's just going to help me overall to fill out that higher quadrant, even if the vert isn't jaw dropping by any means.
As much as I do love this topic, I'm going to pull us back a little bit because I did just now realize we have not yet made the jump through the remainder of your career at Oregon State and into
Yep.
the draft. So
Yep.
we still have a good bit to cover.
Let's
So
do it.
let's talk about you becoming a weekend starter at Oregon State and kind of playing out the season there.
Yeah, season was fantastic. I really have no issues with a lot of the stuff. The biggest issue was, I guess, losing in the super regionals, but that comes with the territory, I suppose. But it was a great year. Like I said, a lot of the issues that we tried to fix in the fall really came to a head in the season, and my velocity was up, my average velocity, my stuff was better. I was throwing way more strikes. I was able to, when I did walk somebody, it didn't spiral like in the past. And so a lot of those things that we fixed really factored into a lot of what came to head in the season. And it was such a fantastic year. I was the Friday starter, and then Jacob was the Saturday starter. He had an incredible year as well. And so just being able to pitch next to your best friend was just fantastic. I did have one setback where I had to miss a couple weeks right at the beginning of the season. I don't even really know what it was at this point. I mean, I felt something strange, like it kind of felt like a nerve pinch or something. And
on the extensor side, right? Wasn't it?
Yeah, it was, but it wasn't. I don't even really know how to pinpoint it. It was in, and I think what happened is I was pitching in a game versus Arkansas in the second week of the year, and there was approaching 20,000 people at the stadium we were in, Globe Life, and so my adrenaline was so high, and I think for some reason, maybe because my adrenaline was so high, I like hyperextended my elbow a little bit or something, and I felt this weird buzz, and so I came out for precaution or whatever you want to call it, and then came back and didn't feel anything for the rest of the year. So I guess I'll just attribute that to high adrenaline and bad luck. But besides that, I was healthy all year. I had no setbacks, and then going into this off season was fantastic because I had a lot of time to really get onto FlexPro to establish my baselines and establish my forearm strength and a lot of just my overall strength when it comes to arm health and everything.
Well, I appreciate the shout out. We'll dig more on that in a little bit. When you were talking about tinkering and you're a guy who never really stops, I immediately thought of us on the FaceTime not too long ago, and you're trying to train in like a supinated position to simulate ball release and trying to get everything you can out of everything you do.
Of course.
But now let's step back to the draft. You guys had the sad loss in the super regional. Did you have much expectations going into the draft? You obviously put together a good year. I'm sure you are not naive to the fact that you were going to get picked at some point, but did you have any idea where you were going to go?
I mean, a little bit. I think I actually fell lower than I was expecting, probably due to that I don't know if we'll call it an injury, but like the weird thing that I felt at the beginning of the year, maybe some teams were kind of turned off to that. And so when I got drafted, that whole day, I didn't really hear much. And so like when I got the call with the Marlins, I was talking to my agent, and he's like, "This is going to be a great fit." And so far, like the Marlins have been awesome. I think that it's a fantastic organization. They're really heading in the right direction with a lot of their player development and a lot of the things that they're doing. They've hired a lot of great people. They've got a lot of people backing them, and I think they're going to do really good things. And kind of like I said, of not being satisfied at anything, I kind of took it as a chip on my shoulder. It sounds dumb because I was selected very high. I took it as a little disrespectful. I was like, nah, I deserve to be picked higher, and I've used it as kind of a chip on my shoulder of really just feeling the fire. And it's probably a little bit, I guess, vain. Whatever I can do to give myself motivation and to just kind of keep that edge, I guess, is the biggest thing. And so I've taken a lot of that in stride and really used it to kind of hone in the specifics. And now my goal is, I don't care about the draft. I just want to make the big leagues and really make a presence there. So like that's my next step forward.
For sure. And I know you didn't get any game time after signing with the Marlins. So what did a lot of that look like when you were at the complex? Was it just getting used to their practices and their training, or what was daily life like at that point?
It was definitely a change of pace. You had a lot more free time than you'd want. The actual days would like wake up at 5:30, maybe 6 every morning, and then we'd go lift, and then we'd have little time to eat breakfast or whatever, and then we'd go throw. So during this time, I was ramping back up. I was, just working through a lot of that stuff, getting my arm back into shape. And towards the back end, I threw a couple bullpens and got off the mound a little bit. But overall, daily life was like wake up, go lift, eat, throw, do conditioning or whatever. Maybe we had meetings. We had Spanish class pretty frequently, which was pretty fun. And then it would be like go back to the hotel and play cards for like 4 hours. So it was
not such a bad life. I do love hearing that you guys had Spanish class. I've spent some time in a couple different orgs, and I've always seen the Latin American guys get English class, but there were no offerings of Spanish classes. So do you know how long the Marlins have been doing that?
I'm not sure, but to their credit, that's been a huge point of emphasis for them, is like they want to integrate us into the Latin culture as much as the Latins are getting integrated into American culture. And so it's been a great blend. Like I've met some really great people from Latin America, a lot of great Dominican teammates, a lot of great Venezuelan teammates, and just people that you hear their background and you hear their story, and it's really cool to get to know like their culture and see how different it is from ours, and just their journey to kind of the same spot of being teammates. And it's pretty cool to see, and getting to talk to them in Spanish. I mean, like their face lights up and they're like, they just love to talk, and it's cool to see them, trying their English out, and then I'm trying my Spanish out, and it's broken both ways, but it's cool to just try to piece this stuff together and really try to have good conversations with them, because I'm sure they appreciate it. They're in a foreign country and they don't know a lot of the happenings of what goes on here, and so just to give them a little piece of comfort is big for me, and to try to help them out, and I get to learn Spanish in the process, so I'm not complaining.
Well, if the conversations you are having are anything like the ones I was having, I assume they're completely LeBron James centric or just about Messi and Ronaldo.
I haven't had any of those conversations. Apparently, that my Latin teammates are a lot different. The biggest thing we talk about is like we'd play cards in the locker room, and like they'd teach us their Dominican or their Venezuelan card games, or we'd play dominoes or something. And a lot of it's like learning how to have fun and talk trash in Spanish back and
Yeah.
forth with everyone. Like that's been the most fun part, is just that like bonding time of like you're talking trash and letting them know, and then you guys are competing and winning, and just having a good time.
So I'm assuming the majority of the vocab that you've learned at this point is not safe for this podcast.
Yeah, definitely a mix in there. Probably 50% of it's been profanity, but we'll leave that off the podcast.
All right. We'll challenge you another time. We'll bring you on. We can have a culture shock episode
There
or
we go.
something like that.
Awesome.
But yeah, let's jump ahead now and talk about the fall and winter. Now that you've had this long arc of development, you said probably the longest that you've ever had it, especially being healthy, the longest
Yeah.
development window you've ever had. So you get back home, and what was your plan? You talked about developing the cutter, you talked about kind of refining the arsenal, but were there other things in the mix?
Yeah, I mean it started like after the draft, and kind of after that period of when I first came back. It's a daunting amount of time. Like you're looking at almost 4 months of stuff, and this is the time where like either you separate yourself and you get better, or you take a step back and you get worse. Like it's a enough of a time frame that you can really affect your career either positively or negatively. And both Jacob and I and Compost, we all knew this. And so we sat down for long conversations. I know that we had a long conversation with Daryl, and we've had long conversations with a lot of people. And we set out. So we actually sat down about 4 months ago and mapped out every single day for the rest of the off season. So we mapped out pulse workload. We mapped out our FlexPro plan. We mapped out what we were going to do in the gym with different targets that we were going to hit strength, speed, or power wise. And then we had different testing metrics that we set out to look at and to assess. And it's been pretty smooth from there. Like we put in the time at the beginning, and then it was basically like Jacob and I would come in the facility, check every day, like, all right, what's our workload for the day? What's our attack going to be intent wise? And then it was just easy to just do the things, because we did all the bulk work at the beginning. And then it was just basically about knocking off the checklist of every day of what do we need to accomplish today. And I guess I'll start with like the FlexPro stuff. Is our first target was like, let's get a huge strength base going, make sure we're protected strength wise, and then we can have a little bit of fun. You doing the RFD stuff, doing the power rehab stuff, and focusing on the flashy fun stuff. But we had to get, I think that was a total of, it was 30 sessions, so probably about 3 months of total strength work. And so that was a big bulk of time, and those strength cycles suck towards the end, man. I mean, you're pulling, because every time your numbers go up, you got to pull at a higher 70% of your new max. It's pretty brutal, but it was such a good work, and we got so much volume in and so much protection in that now once season comes, it's going to feel like less work even than what we've been doing in the off season. So that's been great.
For sure. Now jumping to the strength side, and I'm gonna make fun of myself. I've now realized I think my first response to you like 5 different times has been for sure. So feel free to make fun of me if I do it again, because I caught it. Don't worry. I got to be better.
Okay. We'll
I got to
we'll
be
figure
better.
that out.
Yeah, this is a part of my development cycle now.
I do
But
the same thing. It's all right.
what have you focused on in the weight room? You're without a doubt a very strong guy. Have you made the shift to more power, speed-based movements there?
Yeah, so we're actually really lucky. Like, I mean, I can't stress this enough how many people we have behind us in our corner here. We have two strength trainers, one of which kind of writes our programs, and the other which has a background in like writing physical studies and testing. And so he developed a system where we're doing force plate testing, Proteus testing, and speed gate testing, and then it kind of takes all of that into account and establishes like a baseline of, all right, do you need more speed work, do you need more power work, or do you need just straight up strength work? And so throughout the off season, we test probably every 4 to 6 weeks ish, and then depending on what the next cycle would be. And so I started off with the Marlins. I did straight strength for the 2 months I was out there. And so I was strong, I was big, I had gained a lot of weight. I felt great. But then it was like, all right, now let's turn all that newfound strength, let's turn it into power, let's turn it into speed. And so I did a big speed cycle following that. And it's kind of flip-flopped throughout the offseason. And right now I'm in a big power cycle. So I'm kind of in between. I'm like trying to move a lot of weight, but also trying to move it fast and move it well. And so it's been shifting throughout the offseason kind of to get our needs. And the sets that we're doing, like kind of in the same way of the strength on the FlexPro, is like we're joking with our trainer. We're like, you're kicking our butt here. I mean, we're doing heavy volume sets when it comes to a lot of exercises, which is to kind of set us up, because then once season hits, we're going to have different types of workloads. But now the workloads are going to seem less overall, I guess, because we've set such a big baseline for how our bodies are recovering and reacting to the huge workloads we've set.
It is not as common. It's funny the cycle that I think athletes in baseball goes through in general, but there's a handful of pro guys that I've talked to that got really deep into the science of training, and they recognize baseball is a short burst sport, lower volume when it comes to, I guess, not throwing volume,
Yep.
but to everything else you do. It's all short, very distinct bursts of energy. And now the more pro guys that I get involved with, I hear them say that they have actually migrated more towards a traditional bodybuilding-esque volume plan, especially early on in the off season, because by the time they're getting to late August, September, they feel absolutely drained and they want
Yep.
to accumulate as much volume during the winter as possible to
Mhm.
make the season feel like it is just a breeze.
100%. And I think that can be applied to throwing as well. Like, I think a big issue with what's going on now with injuries is not throwing less, it's throwing more and, lifting more and doing more volume. Because what happens when you get injured is those huge, like acute workload spikes. And if you can avoid that by just setting your arm up and setting your body up to such a high standard of workload that when the season comes, it just seems like any other given day. And you can maintain that strength and maintain that volume throughout the season a lot easier if you already have such a high level and a high base. And I think like that's what especially like Japanese pitchers do so well, is they just have these massive workload volumes. And obviously they have their own issues with injuries and whatnot and overuse. But at the same point, you can look and take what they do really well and look and take what high volume people do really well and implement it to yourself. And so I think like getting these huge bases is so important moving forward. And I think that's kind of the path that FlexPro has taken too, of getting these big baselines of strength, these month-long things of getting real quality data and quality time set into strength and to building that volume and that workload.
Any other hot injury takes you're willing to throw out there right now, or do you not want to put yourself on the chopping block with that?
I think a lot of the stuff that people look into, especially with elbow injuries, is a little bit misguided. I was just having this conversation with my PT. We were saying like for years and years, everyone's like, you got to strengthen the shoulder to protect the elbow, which I guess is in theory makes sense. You don't want it to go down the chain. You don't want it to affect any of that. But at the same point, like to protect the elbow, you got to protect the elbow. So let's focus on building shoulder strength, but let's also target specific forearm, specific elbow, specific things that are going to protect the most important part of the throw. And so I think like, although it's in the right place with some things, some of the little stuff is misguided in the realm of injury and prevention.
I'll piggyback on that one. I, of course, believe something very similar. Otherwise, we probably wouldn't have FlexPro Grip at this point. But specifically, what you're saying with the shoulder, I think that is a really fun onion to peel in the sense that shoulder injuries have continued to decrease as elbow injuries have continued to increase. And I've talked about this before. I'm sure there's people that are listening that think like, yeah, of course, here goes SpongeBob ripping his pants again. Just this take from Adam.
Mhm.
But we're seeing this increase in elbow injuries because we've gotten so good at training everything else. So we are
Yep.
so strong and can produce so much force. So everything that you were saying to your PT, I agree with completely in the sense that, yeah, we can get the shoulder really strong, but that's not going to protect the elbow. If anything, now the shoulder can just handle more force, and
Yep.
that more force that it can handle has to go somewhere.
Yep.
So now the elbow is being subjected to more force in the process. So we need to now buttress the elbow or insulate the elbow to prevent that from being the weakest link.
Of
So to
course.
me, we've just continued to push the weakest link further down the chain.
Yeah, and I think that's probably just because we're so good at fixing elbows. Like anytime you hear, oh, he's got Tommy John, it's just like, yeah, whatever. Which I don't think is the right way to go. Like obviously, nothing's ever going to be perfect, but if we can attack that and simultaneously drop injuries just overall, rather than like shoulder injuries are down, but then they just migrate to something else, whether that's like back issues, lat issues, elbow issues, whatever it might be. We don't want to migrate somewhere else. We just want to take away injuries to begin with. You just want to protect overall rather than push the problem elsewhere.
Now, do you think most pitchers are thinking about this stuff, or is this just the way your brain works?
I mean, I don't know. I would like to think it's just kind of the way my brain works. I have fun trying to work through problems. Like I think outside of, like I always joke around, outside of competition, like being analytical and like doing a pitch design pen or sitting in on someone else throwing or talking through like a workload program or a workload plan is just fun for me. Like I just love the game of baseball, and this side of baseball is so fun for me because it's like a math problem that you're trying to solve. And it's not that there isn't a solution, but there's little solutions, and they kind of like it's like a breadcrumb trail that you kind of just keep like crawling through and keep biting through. And I don't know if there's ever going to be like one big loaf of bread at the end, but it's fun for me to keep on and keep working and trying to perfect something that probably can't be perfected, but it's fun for me to try.
Whenever the baseball career does actually end, which I hope is many years from now,
Yep.
I'm sure the damn analytics team would love to have you hop on board.
That would be fun. I've thought about some realm of coaching or something after it's done. Like I never want to step away from the game of baseball. Like I've given so much of my life and love to the game at this point that it's like, what the heck else am I going to do? So it's been fun for me so far, and I hope that it takes me places elsewhere.
No doubt. See, I switched. I was about to say for sure, but I switched to no
No doubt.
doubt.
There we go.
Yeah,
You can
I caught
rotate back and
myself.
forth.
I caught myself on that one.
Yep.
But what do you have on the goals, mission, whatever, your plan for 2025? What in your mind makes this year successful? Like what do you minimally want to accomplish versus what would be the pie in the sky?
I mean, like I said, I'm trying to chase perfection, and so like my real only way that I would say this year is successful is if I crack the big leagues. But it's more of a far stretched goal, I guess, than some other things. I guess, like I said, I measure success in little waves. Like I'm always trying to get that little thing. And so ultimate success would be like cracking the big leagues and really performing. But overall, it would just be on a start to start basis. One, just staying healthy throughout the year, being able to handle my first year's workload, whatever that looks like, with true success and without seeing like a dip towards the end of the year in velocity or my shoulders hanging on by a thread or whatever it might be, just staying healthy. That would be a very well measured way of success, I suppose. And then just overall, just being able to hit my targets of maybe if the team sets out pitch usage targets of like, we want you to hit this and we want you to develop this, and just hitting those targets and making successful progress. I think a more realistic goal would be to just shove through high A, shove through double A, and then end in good standing in double A, ready to get the call next year. So that's kind of my realistic intent, but I probably won't be happy unless I'm sitting there and in the big leagues in Marlins Park and just throwing to some good hitters.
I guess you stole the question from me again, so we're on the same wavelength here. Is starting in high A the plan?
I believe so. I would be lying if I said I knew for sure. But given some of the conversations I've had in the past, if I have a good spring training and I'm in good standing and whatever, that seems like the most realistic route. But things change all the time. So I don't know for sure. That's kind of my assumption at this point, but I wouldn't know for sure.
Right. It seems pretty standard for a college arm that's entering pro ball as a starter. High
Hmm.
A seems like the regular move. If you ask me to make a bet, that's probably what I would say. And
Yep.
that's just because of seeing every other organization do damn near the exact same thing.
Of course. Yep.
Yeah, I hear you. I respect the competitive nature that saying this year won't be a success unless you crack the show, but it's crazy how difficult it is to move. So even if
100%.
you can make the one move up to double A, that's a massive success where the people in your circle will be very happy, where I'm sure you are like, gosh darn it, like I just two more levels. That's all I need,
Of
two more
course.
levels.
Yep. Even when I get to the big leagues, I'll probably just be like, well, I'm not going to be happy until I'm an all-star. And then it's like, well, I'm not going to be happy until I win the Cy Young or whatever it might be. And so I'm trying to be better about that. I wasn't great about it in college, of appreciating the moment and really like accepting, like, to this point, I've accomplished a lot. It's not what I want. I'm still far from the goals that I've set for myself, but I have accomplished a lot. My dad always, tries to like, hey man, like take a second and really soak it all in. And I'm really bad about that. So I'm trying to be better about that and really appreciate everything that's come. But it's tough for me because, like I said, I'm never really satisfied, which helps me a lot, but it works to my detriment a lot as well. Just understanding of where I'm at and being more where my feet are at and figuring that out. It would maybe help a little bit, but at the same time, that's kind of what makes me me. And so I don't want to take that edge away.
I'm sure there's little ways that you can work that in as a goal. Maybe since you are a starting pitcher and you'll have tons of time on your hand, maybe you can do ballpark reviews or something
Yep.
like that, just so you get comfortable in a sense of where you're at. Not taking away your competitive edge, but you can have some fun kind of on the side besides just tinkering with your arsenal or getting the next guy out.
100%. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
that I'm definitely gonna have a lot of free time. That's an understatement. But I got to come up with a hobby. That was my biggest issue this off season, was actually too much free time. I'd get done working out for the day. Like I just hang around ABA for like hours on hours just because I'm like, what am I gonna do? Go home and make dinner? That's all that I had to do for the day, was work out, train, and then like golf on the weekends. That was about it.
Tough life to live,
I
but
know. Hey, I'm in a tough position. Let's just say that I'm unbelievably grateful, and like I said, I got no complaints. Like I'm one of the luckiest people in the whole world. So having too much free time isn't a real problem.
yes, I know a lot of people are jealous of the seat you're in, but hey, you earned it, man. You put in a ton of work to get here. And with that, it kind of concludes my questioning. I don't know if there's anything else you feel you want to share or if there's anything you still have up your sleeves.
Yeah, I mean, I just once again just like to say thanks to you guys at the FlexPro team, and y'all have really helped and established a way. Because in the past, we've never really had a good way to train forearms. There's been some shoulder strength sensors and some other ways that you can test other realms of strength. There really hasn't been anything forearm based, and so the work you guys are doing, I think, is it's so beneficial to just not even just to me, but just to the game of baseball. And I appreciate all the work that you guys are putting in behind the scenes to make the product better. All the time you guys have spent developing the app and everything you guys have done is truly remarkable in my opinion. And I can't thank you guys enough.
Well, thanks a ton. We wouldn't be in this position if it wasn't for people like you. It means a ton to have you be a part of the family, and of course, to the rest of the ABA guys. We're extremely appreciative to them as well. And of course, we're appreciative to the listeners. So, to everyone out there, thanks for laying back with us.